I'm Teresa Carraggio, and this is Third Paradigm. I have emerged from the dark cave of analyzing scriptures of hatred, speaking of the lighting in my last video, and I'm ready to look at solutions. So what better than James Corbett and Solution Watch? A recent episode was called Freedom is the Answer, What is the Question? He was interviewing Larkin Rose, who produced the Jones Plantation and who wrote The Most Dangerous Superstition, and Keith Knightley, who is the editor of the Libertarian Institute and also wrote the Voluntaryist Handbook. And if you've seen my other episode on James and Keith, it's their review of UNS with the unnecessary war, and it's a very snappy review, so I suggest watching that. In this episode, they were answering Corbett Review comments on anarchy and whether it is a feasible form of government. Now, as a spoiler alert, I am 100% in agreement with their goal. So much so that I spent a decade writing my book, How to Dismantle an Empire, on how we could accomplish that goal. So I am not in any disagreement in terms of what we're looking to accomplish and whether that's possible, but I think there deserves to be some deep thinking on how that's done. In the episode, someone says morality isn't simple, and I would say that government is also not simple in terms of the logistics. I usually start by defining the question and all the important terms in it. But in this case, there's all questions that freedom is the answer to. So let's define what freedom is when I'm using the term. I mean the freedom of communities under 200,000 people to have the exclusive right to issue, tax, and determine the trade value of a currency that's backed by the properties within their border. This doesn't mean communism. This doesn't mean that all of that is owned by the state. But properties are the intergenerational transfer of wealth. And generally, they have some time when they are in the default owner, where the banks are the ones who are issuing that credit. And as you probably know, 97% of dollars, for instance, are issued through the mortgages. So what I'm looking at is a way of taking that back and using it to foster communities. If you don't, and it didn't seem like anyone was looking at this, you might as well just not bother with government, because everything really is determined by the economy. You can decide what you want to do, but how you do it has to be done through economics. My book is all about system change, very practical steps that would give us the power to control our own labor. I don't believe that there is anything that we can be doing right now that actually makes a difference. We're scrubbing out our peanut butter jars and they are burning the fucking planet. So I suggest that you do the things that make you happy and don't do any of the things that make you feel virtuous, and instead start imagining what it is that you would put into place if we get that chance to make these system changes. The other word that I'd like to define is anarchy. As Keith mentioned, that means without the archons, without rulers. And I define it as rule by rules, not by rulers. Another term I often use is small-scale sovereignty or community self-governance. And then you need to define the size of community because, as I say, bigger is better for empire, but smaller serves sovereignty. Under this system, everyone doesn't need to agree because what you do for your community should be different than mine because the needs are different. But these are things that we can learn from and experience, as Larkin says, the consequences of our decisions put into action. So I'm going to be comparing the policy decisions that I would make in Terezania with the ones that James would make in Corbettville, or that Keith would make in Knightopia and Larkin would make in Roseopolis. The first question that James read was talking about how will people in vulnerable situations survive under anarchy? Who will take care of the old people, the children in difficult situations? Who's going to take care of the homeless? And the answer that Keith gave was looking at Anthony Scalia saying that what you end up with from the state is donors without love and recipients without gratitude. What he says is that under a system where you have freedom to trade, that you will end up with cheaper goods, and so that's better for people who don't have a lot of money, and that you can do things like GoFundMe, and that he cites Neil Ferguson talking about how in China that the few Chinese who were not in China under communism actually did much better and had much more money than the rest of them put together. Larkin also points out that people naturally care and that that's why we vote in governments that are going to help the poor, even though that's not what ends up happening. And that's something that James also reiterated, that he says that we think we're the only person who cares about the poor and that all those other people are greedy and immoral, and that that's a contradiction in terms, that it's the system that turns people into assholes because they have to get as much as they can because they are always left in a position of insecurity. The 4 cornerstones of my anarchist ideology is people are inherently good, meaning that they're born good. When they behave badly, systems are to blame. All systems can be changed, and all communities are equally capable of self-governance. When we see other people as not being as good as we are or caring as much as we do, we're taking more away from them than money. We're taking away their honor. We're making ourselves morally superior to them. And I think that's a more important thing for us to be generous with than even money. What that question is asking is, should we have a need-based system like communism, socialism, democracy? What I find as a parent is that you get more of whatever it is you reinforce. So if you reinforce needs, you're going to end up with more of them. What I have is a reciprocity-based system, and that gives people the ability to take care of themselves and makes it where everyone is only responsible for a certain number of people that you can take responsibility for. In my town, I live in the woke capital of the world, Santa Cruz, along with Oakland, Berkeley. If we were to take this big bucket of money that's all the mortgages and say to government, what do we do with this? They would say, oh, we can help the homeless. Let's build more homes for the homeless. And we would end up bringing more homeless in. So our love is being used against us. They take things like affordable housing and use it as the carrot that gets us to allow 4,000 new units being built on 20 acres of 12-story buildings here in a place where we're in earthquake country. We don't have any buildings over 5 stories. Let's look at Keith's policy of absolute trade freedom in Knightopia. A decade back, I did a lot of research on Firestone rubber plantations in Liberia that use third-generation slaves, often children, who are working under noxious conditions. I tried to get my city to not drive our kids to their schools on buses that had Firestone tires. But it's impossible because the anti-corruption policies say you have to take the lowest bid. And whenever you're using slave labor, it's always going to be the lowest bid. So there is no way that you as a producer are ever going to be able to compete with that. On a practical level, it also means that money is going to drain out of your community. It's not going to recirculate and create more because the cheapest products that are global are always going to suck you dry, and you're not really going to encourage production. Larkin talks about the flip side of that with the freedom to sell your products or your house to whomever you want, and that is something that needs to have borders and immigration be things that are not issues. When he looks at that, he's looking at it from maybe a 60s perspective of saying, well, I'm in a white neighborhood and I don't want people who aren't like me around. But that's not who's buying the houses right now. It's a Saudi Arabia hedge fund. It is a Chinese wealth fund. It is the WEF who are making sure that they're bidding 25% over any asking price so that people who live there can't afford to buy because they don't care. They're creating the money. And so they can bid as much as they want because it's just a loan to themselves. How would I address these issues in Terezania? I look at the money coming in being transferred into what I call carrots, the little sign on the keyboard, and that my rule for that is that it must be distributed equally to all citizens within your borders. How you determine a citizen is up to you, but it must include any child born to a citizen in your borders. Now, I don't think immigration would be a problem because I'm a firm believer in deportation, starting with the corporations that have usurped the land and the resources of third world countries. Once you get them out of there, people don't have to leave those beautiful places that they live where we want to go on vacation. So once you have your own community and you're distributing what I call targeted dividends. So the way I do it, you have to use them in these 4 different areas in order for them to be worth something. And those areas are food, well care, home improvements, and education. To protect the housing market, I make it a 2-to-1 ratio of imperial currencies, here the dollar, to carats, and I price all housing in carats. So therefore, if some corporation or hedge fund wants to come in and buy up housing, they're going to have to pay twice as much as someone who is living and working there. And then I do the reverse and put a 50% tax on anything that someone is spending in dollars, so they can have it in their savings and that there's a limit to how much they can transfer into tax-free carats every month. But if they want to buy something from China rather than something next door, it's going to be taxed. So that gives you more funding in your treasury so that you can back the carats when someone cashes them out. And it also gives you the ability to issue twice as many as you have in your treasury because you know that you can back them at that level. That can't be touched by any form of government. It only can be an anarchist system where the decision of how to spend it is up to each person. So that's a primer on my system, and I hope that one of these gentlemen invites me on so that we can not debate, but dream together. Look at how we can build the kind of society that we want in a way that doesn't all need to be the same, but where we can compare what would the consequences be of things like intellectual property rights. Do we want to honor them knowing that other people may not sell their products to us if we don't, but we could be part of a network of people who are all inventing things and sharing? For more on this topic, Here's How to Be Czar of Your Own Fiefdom, and this is the playlist on restoring local sovereignty. Thank you for watching.